Hello, this is Dr. D, and today we are going to talk about lymphatic system. All right, first and foremost, lymphatic system is not a circulation. All right, what does it involve? It involves lymph, of course. This lymph is collected by lymph capillaries. The lymph capillaries drain into bigger vessels which pass through the lymph node. These vessels are the collecting ducts. These collecting ducts drain into where? Subclavian vein, which enters the right atrium, and in this way the lymph it goes back into the blood. All right, so let's understand what is lymph. So if you look at the lymphatic vessels, you will see that the lymphatic vessels are closed, blindly ending vessels that are very in close association with capillary beds in the tissues. So here what happens is that as the blood is flowing into the tissues via capillaries, there is a higher pressure. All right. Under no circumstances you are supposed to memorize this number, but know that as the blood is entering the capillaries, there's a higher pressure at this end, because of which the blood is squeezed out. Not all of it. RBC, large proteins do not squeeze out, but most of the blood drains out and bathes the tissues, and it is called tissue fluid. At the end of the capillary, there is a lower pressure. So not all of the tissue fluid enters back. Just to give you a number, if 10 milliliters is entering, then only 8 is collected and taken away. 2 still remains here around the tissue. This tissue fluid, which basically is the blood minus RBC minus large proteins, that is the lymph. And that is collected by lymphatic capillaries. Okay, so lymph is the fluid inside lymphatic vessels. The lacteals are special type of lymphatic capillaries which are lining the small intestine. We'll study this in unit 4 when we'll talk about digestion. For now, you just need to know what a lacteal is, a special lymphatic capillary which absorbs digestive fat and transports the fat to venous circulation. All right. Functions. Absorbs excess tissue fluid. If it did not do so, you will end up with edema. Helps return smaller blood proteins. Remember, large proteins never escaped. The small proteins that filter out of the capillaries into the tissues are brought back. Transports foreign particles like bacteria and virus to lymph nodes. Why? Because in the lymph nodes, this lymph is going to be filtered and you will get rid of bacteria and virus. We'll see that in the next slide. And of course, what did we say? Lacteal in the small intestine absorbs what? Dietary fat. Okay. How does the lymph enter the capillaries? The lymph capillaries are very similar to blood capillaries. They are made up of a single layer of simple squamous cells. But look at the cells. They overlap each other, forming what? Flaps. So whenever there's high pressure outside this blindly ending capillary, lymph capillary, why? Because there's accumulation of tissue fluid. These flaps will be forced open and the lymph is going to what? Enter into the capillaries. All right. Now there are 2 large collecting ducts of the lymph. The small lymph capillaries, what did I say? Drain into collecting ducts. On the right side is the right lymphatic duct and on the left side is the thoracic duct. Both of these will drain into what? Into the subclavian vein. And the subclavian vein, what does it do? It drains into the right atrium. So all the tissue fluid that you had lost here, remember we talked about the 2 mils? I'm just giving that number. You do not have to memorize that. Is returned back into the blood when the lymph is collected and enters back into the right atrium where the blood is being pumped in. All right. All right. So here, this is just to explain about the axillary lymph node. You can read this. This is not very important. Now, this is important slide. What causes lymph to flow? So, of course, there are a couple of things. One is breathing. So, as you are breathing and relaxing, remember inhaling and exhaling, then what happens is that pressure will help to flow the lymph. Otherwise, also, it is the contraction of the smooth cells that squeeze the lymph forward, and also because of skeletal muscle contraction. So there is no pumping organ, all right? One-way flow of the lymph is maintained through what? What did I say? Skeletal muscle contraction, contraction of the smooth muscles, they will squeeze the lymph forward, and then there is the breathing. Now, how is the backflow prevented? Backflow is prevented because they have valves. This is interesting. Blood vessels, only the veins have valves, but the lymph vessels, all of them will have valves which will prevent backflow. Okay, so these things you have to know and remember and keep in mind. Lymph nodes. Now, as the lymph capillaries are flowing through the lymph vessels, you have lymph nodes. These are tiny lymphatic organs, and they contain, what do they contain? Lymphocytes and macrophages. Go back and think about what lymphocytes and macrophages are. Macrophage is phagocytic. Lymphocyte will help both fight pathogens. All right, they're variable in size, but basically they have a capsule. At one end, they have a helium. So the afferent enters into, will bring lymph into this lymph node and will go out through the efferent, all right? And the lymph is squeezed through the main part of the node where there are patches or islands of lymphocytes and macrophages. All right, so basically what do lymph nodes do? They will filter the lymph, and these macrophages are going to remove what? The lymph cells and the macrophages are going to remove foreign pathogens. So the inside, like I said, has a cortex. The outside is the cortex, the inner has the medulla. The inner medulla has these centers that contain, what do they contain? They contain lymphocytes and macrophages. And here the impurities are removed. All right. These also, where do they occur? So there are certain interesting ones. Tonsils are interesting because they are special kind of lymph nodes, you know. And then there are the pear patches. So where are the pear patches? They are aggregates in the, again, in the what? In the distal part of the small intestine. Now the lymph node locations are along the path of the lymphatic vessels, but note, absent in the CNS, central nervous system. So yes, they're found in the cervical, axillary, supratrochlear, inguinal, pelvic, abdominal, and thoracic. All right, but absent in the central nervous system. You can see the locations of the lymph nodes. Now, there are special lymph organs which are large lymph nodes, basically. Thymus. Thymus is located anterior to the heart in the sternum area. All right. So they are very large and active during infancy, but they shrink after puberty. So if in an adult, is highly shrunk structure. All right. So here, what is so important? This is where the T lymphocytes, remember the lymph cells were two types, T cells and the B cells. So although the T lymphocytes, remember what is the origin? The origin is the what? Red bone marrow. But to mature, the T lymphocytes will migrate to the thymus. And this is stimulated by a hormone. The maturation of the T lymphocytes is stimulated by thymosin, a hormone produced by the thymus. I repeat, T lymphocytes' origin is the red bone marrow. After the origin, they go to the thymus for maturation. The entire maturation process is stimulated by a hormone produced by the thymus. What's the name of the hormone? Thymosin. All this is important. Please make sure you understand. So maturation will make the inactive T cell into active T cell. Maturation means where the T cells are educated and taught the difference between self and non-self. All right. Spleen is another large lymph organ. This is where basically the RBCs are ruptured. Spleen is also called the graveyard of the RBC. Why? Because the lymph is squeezed through, the blood is squeezed through the spleen, and any old RBC is destroyed, all right, by the macrophages. So there are basically two types of defense against infection. One is the innate. Innate is the one that you are born with, and adaptive is the one that is specialized. All right. So innate is the non-specific. You're born with these. These are the barriers, immune system, that are non-specific. Adaptive is something that is very specific. All right. I'll give you a simple analogy. Innate defense would be like your dog. Okay, your pet dog. So a dog will bark at a squirrel. It'll bark at a person who knocks on the door, at a leaf, even when the wind blows. Okay, so it really doesn't matter. It is non-specific. Adaptive defense would be like these Navy SEALs. They're told a particular task. They're told to go after a particular thing, or maybe these these trained dogs in the airports. They are educated or taught to go after a particular drug, or smell out a particular explosive. So that would be a specific. All right, so know the difference between innate, which is non-specific, that you're born with, adaptive, that you develop through your lifetime. And these are specific against invading organisms. So there's a specific T cell to fight a particular bacteria. That's a good example. All right. And the lymph cells will recognize these specific antigens. We'll talk about that in the next slide. I thank you for your time and attention. So please contact me if there are any questions or concerns. And I thank you for listening to me. Have a good day.